Before we begin discussing today's topic of soccer violence, I want to remind you that I've put a guide to writing papers for this course on our D2L website, under content and on the home page under news. Please read this guide carefully. It explains how to structure your paper, what's required of a thesis, how to cite secondary sources, how to use secondary sources, and secondary sources are of course critical works written on the texts and films that we've discussed in class, and also how to create a works cited list. Now if you have any questions about this guide to writing papers, or about the guide to library research, which is available as a PowerPoint under content on your website, then please post these questions on the discussion page as a separate posting from your response paper, and I'll address your questions in Wednesday's lecture, which is going to be all about your papers. Okay, now turning to today's topic, which is soccer hooliganism, and in particular the descriptions of soccer hooligans and soccer violence provided by the American journalist Bill Buford in the excerpt taken from his 1990 study of English hooligans among the thugs. Now, after the last lecture, in which we focused on the feelings of international camaraderie arising from the 2006 World Cup and John Doyle's description of being in Germany for that tournament, it feels like a wrench to have to now confront the xenophobic violence which is also associated with the sport of soccer. But I think it would be intellectually dishonest not to consider a phenomenon that has had such an influence over the development of soccer, particularly in England. I've included amongst the materials for today some of the most notable occurrences of soccer violence. There's a whole list in a PowerPoint, caused by English fans both at home and abroad, and I use the term fans lightly, I really mean hooligans here. I can vividly remember at the age of 17 visiting Paris for the first time and seeing a group of English soccer fans chanting their way down a Parisian boulevard. I was at that moment seized by the desire to appear Parisian or German or just European in general, anything but English. It's not logical to feel shame and disgust at activities, however appalling they may be, in which you are not personally involved and which are just carried out by your fellow countrymen, but it is one of the mysterious consequences of national identity. I want to begin by considering the context in which I came across this excerpt from Bill Buford's book Among the Thugs, which was published in 1990. It appears in a collection called The New Kings of Non-Fiction, edited by Ira Glass. If you don't know Ira Glass's works, I urge you to listen to his radio program, This American Life, which in my humble opinion is the finest radio program ever made, and appears on KGOU, our local university radio station, on Saturdays at noon and on Wednesdays at 8 o'clock in the evening. This American Life is largely journalistic in its approach, but the contributors are encouraged to create audio essays rather than conventional news pieces, to make their stories subjective, individual, quirky and essayistic. By the way, Ira Glass is largely responsible for the rise of David Sedaris, whom you may have heard of, who's one of the funniest contemporary American essayists, and of Sarah Vowell, who is the funniest American historian. And you may say, what does that mean, funniest American historian? That's like saying the best English cuisine, but really she is very funny and well worth reading, and some of her works like The Wordy Shipmates, or Assassination Vacation, or Strange Fishes, I believe it's called, one about Hawaii very recently. They're very, very worthwhile and make history deeply entertaining and quirky. Now, Getting back to Ira Glass, in his introduction to the New Kings of Non-Fiction, Glass lists the following criteria for his contributors. Firstly, the contributors need to be incredibly good reporters. Second, they need to take on subjects that nobody else has figured out are worthy of reporting. Third, they need to be entertaining and funny. Fourth, they need to convey the pleasure of thinking through a problem, of discovery, the pleasure of making sense of the world. Finally, they need to display an unusual degree of empathy with their subject and really try to get into their subjects' heads. I think we can see how the excerpt from Among the Thugs fits Glass's criteria. I'll leave you to judge whether this excerpt is incredibly good reporting, but certainly Buford's approach, spending time with the hooligans, talking to them, trying to understand their behaviour, is not one that was readily adopted by journalists at the time, who were, like the rest of the population, keen to dismiss soccer hooligans as purely animalistic thugs. But on the other hand, how can we expect to solve a problem if we don't understand what it really is? Despite the horrific descriptions of violence at the end, this excerpt is also very humorous, I think, and entertaining, often at the expense of Buford himself, as he, a US reporter, attempts to ingratiate himself with a group of English soccer hooligans. Finally, I think we can see how Buford empathises with his subjects, however repellent and appalling their behaviour may be. And I think the piece benefits from that empathy. We get to understand the mentality of the soccer hooligans and the weirdly hierarchical and structured organisation that they bring, paradoxically, to a riot. We also begin to understand why these hooligans commit acts of violence. As Buford explains elsewhere in Among the Thugs, quote, "Why do young males riot every Saturday? They do it for the same reason that another generation drank too much, or smoked dope, or took hallucinogenic drugs, or behaved badly or rebelliously. Violence is their antisocial kick, their mind-altering experience, an adrenaline-induced euphoria that might be all the more powerful because it is generated by the body itself, with, I was convinced, many of the same addictive qualities that characterise synthetically produced drugs." So by attempting to understand the soccer hooligans, by spending time with them, Buford offers a new thesis, a new insight into their behaviour. And I think it's only by doing that, by spending time among the thugs, that we can get this in-depth, up-close view of a phenomenon that is extremely important in current society. Thanks very much.